Hey guys, Carrie Z here at the Hunt Fish Travel Podcast. I am on the line with Matthew Crawford. He is just a fishing machine at his very young age, and I am very, very impressed. Fishing enthusiast, sharing fishing reports and info, helping you catch more fish. These are all his taglines on Facebook. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You have been really just blazing through the seminar scene here. A lot of really good feedback. Why don't you tell
That's
the
good.
listeners? Yeah, really. You're based in Oshkosh, right?
Yep,
Oshkosh, I
Oshkosh,
believe.
Wisconsin. That's where I do
Okay.
90% of my fishing nowadays, but I do enjoy traveling around the state, trying to learn new things about different fishing environments.
Awesome. Did you grow up fishing? What is your background?
Oh, that's a long story. I did not exactly grow up fishing other than once in a while going with my dad or going with my grandma. But about 5 or 6 years ago now, I I think 6 years ago now, COVID happened. At that time, I was very heavy into running long distance, and that took up most of my time. Like, I used to run about as much as I fish now, which is saying a lot. But then COVID happened, races were canceled, and so I didn't really have a reason to be running all the time anymore. So I wanted something else that was outdoorsy to do. So I started fishing on my own, and the first time I went out, I was catching some decent sized perch, 8, 9 inches, and I was pretty content with myself. And then all of a sudden, I hooked something a little heavier, and the line just stopped, and I couldn't pull this perch up off the bottom. And I'm pulling and pulling, it's just not moving. And then finally, it moves off the bottom. And then just like that, it's up on the surface. It's the biggest largemouth bass I've seen in my entire life. And I am very excited. Like, I am stoked. And so I reach down and I'm freaking out. I reach down and I grab the line to try and yank this fish up onto the dock, and it snaps. And I watch the big bass swim right
Come
on
on.
down. Yep. So that was a good experience for me, actually, because it made me wonder. So how did I hook that bass in the first place? I'd never seen a fish that big in my life. How did I hook that? And why did it break me off? That was my big question. I was like, man, I had this chance at this big bass. How on earth, why did I lose it? What did I do? So eventually, through some Google searches, I learned what the drag system was on a spinning reel. And it turned out, as I was fighting this fish, my drag was winched down. I swear it must have been winched down with a wrench, because it just was not loose at all. And so there was no drag pulling out. Then I learned about grabbing the line puts a lot of tension between the section of line and the fish that you're fighting. And so that snapped the fish off. Anyway, long story short, lost the bass. But then that made me think, okay, now I understand what I did wrong. So then I went out for about every day for the next week, because again, it was COVID time, had nothing better to do. So went out every day for the next week, and eventually I hooked a big bass again. This time I knew how to land it, and so I landed it. So that experience was one that was frustrating at first, but it made me think, wow, okay, I can do this. And then from then on, I was learning about what different kinds of fish there are in the Winnebago system, learning about all the ways to catch them, all the times of year to catch them. One fun fact I like sharing with people is that at one point, I thought that fish actually stopped eating in the winter. So I started airbrushing lures and painting lures so I could have something to do over the winter. I thought fish genuinely just got cold and stopped eating, because that obviously makes sense, right? Eventually, thankfully, I found out how to catch some fish through the ice, so now my winters are not as boring, but I've definitely come a long way in terms of going out fishing and figuring it out.
That's crazy. Talk about being motivated. You were like, I am going to get this fish. Oh,
Yep.
no, you did not? That's
Exactly.
hysterical.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's interesting. So, and then it was just off to the races from there, huh? And you were just hooked. Now you're obsessed.
Yep. Hooked, line and sinker. Yep, exactly.
So you said that you travel all around Wisconsin. Do you fish other states?
Once
What
in a
is your
great
favorite state
while,
to
I'll go
fish?
fish either Minnesota or Illinois. I even got to fish Washington State 2 summers ago now, which massive smallmouth bass and walleyes, surprisingly, in the lake I was fishing.
Oh, neat.
So that was very cool. But I definitely enjoy Wisconsin because there are so many different lakes and rivers you can fish. I mean, my top two, I would say by far, are the Lake Winnebago system and the Mississippi River. They, I would say, hold similar size of fish. Each of them do, like bluegills, perch, crappies, walleyes, pike. but the way you fish for them and sometimes the size of the fish in certain bodies of water will be different. So in the Mississippi, I personally feel like the northern pike over there just are bigger on average. I also feel like the perch are bigger. So there's some fish over there that are just more fun to fish for. But then I look at a place like the Madison chain of lakes, and it's like Holy Bluegill Factory. Like, this is a great place to go if you want bluegills and if you live close to there. Then you've got fishing around Milwaukee, Port Washington, fishing over on Lake Michigan and in the rivers that come off it. Like, the trout fishing over there, just so different than fishing over here. We just don't have that kind of thing here. And then over similarly near the Mississippi River, you've got the stream trout fishing over there in La Crosse and in the driftless area, as they call it. So it's, when I tell you that my biggest challenge is figuring out where I'm going fishing the next day, I mean it. I just love fishing for all these different fish and at all different times of year for all these different good bites that are going on. So it's really hard to decide where to go and when.
How did you get into doing seminars?
Is it bad that I don't know the answer to that? Yes, I do. Never mind. Dan Durbin, one of the folks who's in charge of running the Wisconsin Fishing Expo and the Wisconsin Ice Fishing Expo, he actually sent me a message on Facebook because I started posting on Facebook about 2 years ago, and he noticed that this region especially, and even just Wisconsin in general, were really appreciating the helpful fishing reports that I was putting out and how I wasn't just sharing, hey, look at this big fish I caught, go me. It was more of, here's where I was fishing, here's how I was fishing, here's how I caught these fish, and here's how you can do it too. So he really liked those reports, and when you think about it, that's what a seminar is. It's telling people how to catch fish. So he sent me a Facebook message and asked me if I wanted to do a seminar at the Wisconsin Fishing Expo in Madison. And I said, well, shoot, I like talking about fishing. I like sharing about what I'm doing. Might as well. Sounds like a great opportunity. And it was very enjoyable. And then I was lucky enough that he invited me to go do 2 seminars at the Wisconsin Ice Fishing Expo this past winter.
That's awesome. Good for you. He is a great guy. And they're doing great things with the Ice Fishing Expo and the regular fishing expo. They really are doing great things.
Yeah, big time. They are doing great things for the industry and for people who fish.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest maybe like mindset shift maybe anglers need to catch more fish through the ice? I always hear so many people who are like, oh, I went out and I didn't catch anything, so I'm not going to go out tomorrow. What do you think should be like their biggest shift, just the way they think, to get back out the next day and get out there after it?
One of the things that I talk about a ton in my posts that is, I guess it gets the most questions, is when I say, if you're not marking fish here, don't sit here all day long and just hope that they eventually swim by. Move. Find the fish. It is a lot, though, to ask people to move around during the ice fishing season, because it's not as simple as, oh, just drive the boat that way and we'll start fishing. So you got to drill a hole, you got to drag all your stuff over there. If you don't have a four-wheeler, you might be dragging it by hand, which is not fun. You might have kids or grandkids in tow that you got to bring along with you. So it's a lot to ask to get people to move, but if it's someone who's, let's just call them a diehard ice fisherman, and they're fishing on their own and they really want to get better at ice fishing, by far my success, I would say, on the ice is most affected by how much I move, especially on lakes that are fairly structureless. So if it's like a shallow weedy bay, I might just stay there in the weeds if I find a gap in the weeds that the fish are likely to swim through. But then if I'm fishing a lake like Lake Poygan or Lake Winnebago, where it's fairly featureless in the winter and where you're fishing, and you're just fishing the basin or the mudflats on Winnebago, and you're just trying to come across a school of fish that are just swimming along looking for food, you really just need to keep moving until you get on them. You can definitely just sit there and hope, and sometimes that works, but I've had a lot better success by moving constantly to try and get on the fish.
Okay, and before we started the episode, we talked about a bunch of different things that we could cover. I mean, let's face it, y'all, I could talk to this kid for like 3 hours and not get bored. You really have a proficiency for speaking, and I think that Durbin really... he tapped into that, which I think is wonderful. I think you do a really good job with your seminars, even just from what I could see from the camera in the back for the Ice Fishing Expo. So kudos to that. I think
Thank you.
That honestly, and as one who very much enjoys interviewing people, that's not a small feat.
You know, here, I'll take it.
For reals. You touched on we went over a bunch of different things that we could talk about. And one of the things that you did mention was ice safety, which I mentioned that I was kind of a chicken, which I kind of am when it comes to ice because I'm afraid of drowning. I mean, everybody is, right?
Yeah.
Like nobody wants to
Yes.
drown, right? Nobody wants, I mean,
Right.
it's just not on anybody's bingo card for the day. So
Yeah.
can you walk me through if you go to any new body of water, no matter what it is, and what are the steps that you take as you step out onto that ice to make sure it's safe, or to check ice depths as you go?
So to give a good idea of that, let's take a look at what not to do. So one learning experience I had, I'll call it, was last season. I fell through the ice very early season, which that's clue number one, is it was very, very early in the ice season, probably too early to be walking on the ice, but I went anyway. So I was walking out onto a bay of Lake Winnebago, and I was walking on through an access channel that had 5 inches of ice. I took my spud bar and I checked the ice as I was walking along, and before I even stepped on the ice, I was checking it with a spud bar and then measuring it with a ruler. I had 5 inches of ice, and I'm like, wow, this is great. This is some of the best ice I've seen this season. This is great. So then I start walking onto the channel, and then between channel, go ahead.
Let me just interrupt you really, really, really quick, because for the listeners who don't know what a spud bar is.
Yeah, spud bars are sharp, and if you whack the ice hard with it, if you try and jab the spud bar through the ice, if it doesn't go through in 2 hits, generally it can hold a person, can hold the weight of a person. Okay. If I'm going to actually measure the ice, usually I'll use an auger and drill a hole, just because it can be hard to get a tape measure through a spud bar hole. But if it's like taking you a lot of whacks to get through the ice with the spud bar, you generally don't have to worry about walking on it. You don't have to worry about measuring it. But the spud bar is a very important tool if used properly, which I did not do on this day. So I was using it just fine as I was accessing the ice, checking the ice as I was going on 5 inches of ice. And then between that channel and the bay, there was just the opening into the bay. And what I didn't realize was that the night before there was 50-mile-an-hour winds and ripping right down that channel. And what I didn't realize is that that actually pushed the sheets of ice open between the bay and the channel. So a huge open spot showed up, but it was -20 overnight. So it froze over. And so a skim ice coating was left. Probably like an inch of ice was formed overnight. It was super cold. So I'm walking along. This is all clear ice, by the way, which is a very hard thing to measure by sight because it's all clear. You just see straight to the bottom almost. So I'm walking along on what I think is all 5 inches of ice, and I'm going fast because this is early ice. I am so amped to fish. I get really excited about going fishing. So I'm so excited to go fish. I'm walking really fast, pulling my sled behind me, spud barring away, carrying a flashlight. And then all of a sudden, my spud bar goes straight through the ice. And I'm walking fast, keep in mind. And I'm on slick ice, and I have no cleats on, by the way. Mistake number 2.
Oh, my God.
And I pretty much spud through, and within a second, I just pretty much slide right into the hole.
Oh, no.
So that
clear
looking ice ended up actually being really thin ice towards the mouth of that channel as I was walking onto the lake. And there was like, I don't know, a ½ inch of ice there probably that had formed overnight in that skim layer. So I fall through. And of course, my first thoughts are things that I can't say on air. But then all of a sudden I'm in the water, and this is at a time when I don't own a float suit. This is a time when I just have some ice fishing bibs that soak water up really quickly. I have some very heavy boots on, and I have nothing keeping me afloat, so I'm swimming at that point in the water. And
oh my God,
my first thought is, perfect. I just got these new ice picks. I can just use these and I'll pick myself out. I've seen lots of videos of this online before. So not to take a dig at a brand, but these are the Rapala brand ice picks. And brand new from the factory. The fact of the matter is they come very tightly put together, and the holes that the stakes go into are very tightly wound to the point where really you should even take a file and try and open up the hole more so that the stakes can come apart easier. Point is, it almost feels as if they're frozen together when I'm trying to get them off my neck because they slide together, and I am yanking on these things for a minute, I swear, and they just will not come apart. So at this point now, I'm sitting there in the water with ice picks on, but they won't open, no float suit.
Oh no.
And I'm soaked, and so I'm trying to like climb onto the ice and pull myself on, but I'm soaked, and I'm trying to get onto slick, clear ice, which just you slide off it. There is no getting on top of that. So at this point, I've been in the water for probably 5 minutes, and I'm thinking, all right, I can't get myself out. And this is, by the way, this was in 7 feet of water. So it wasn't like I could just say, okay, I'll just stand on bottom. No big deal. One thing I also started doing was I started yelling for help because there were houses nearby. I'm like, okay, maybe someone will just hear me and whatever, I'll be pulled up by somebody. So another mistake I made is that I went out at like 5:30 in the morning, which in the ice fishing season, that's like 2 hours before light. Usually it's an hour or two before people are even awake. No one responded.
no.
Absolutely nobody came outside or anything from their houses. So I'm sitting there again in the water, struggling to float, not able to get out, and no one is coming to save me. So at this point, I'm saying, wow, this sucks. I never want to do this again. But
Oh
I'm
my
more so
God,
saying,
right?
okay, I might be screwed here. Like, I genuinely, at that point, this is one of the closest moments I've ever come to thinking, I'm going to die. I have no way out of this. I really just could not find a way out. So I don't remember getting out of the water, but my guess is about 5 minutes later, I somehow kicked myself onto the ice because I got out. Don't really know how. I do know that I kicked off my boots, which were brand new, and I was very upset about that at the time. What I learned is that Lacrosse Ice King boots actually float. At least mine did. So I got my brand new boots back. Point is, kick myself out of the ice. It is still
Oh my
negative
God.
20 degrees. So my feet are instantly freezing to the ice when I get out, which is not a fun experience.
Oh my God.
I called my dad up, and thankfully he was awake and nearby to drive over and pick me up. And so then I got home and got in a warm shower. Then a few buddies of mine helped me go retrieve my equipment like an hour later, which was nice of them to do, to say the least.
Oh my
I
God.
got almost all of my equipment back. I lost my spud bar, I lost a flashlight, and I lost like a rod and reel, but everything else I got back. And more important than the equipment, of course, is that I got out, which is like, I am incredibly lucky to have gotten out. And so
Yeah.
I made the conscious decision to go post this on Facebook, which, don't get me wrong, I got a lot of flack for it immediately because this was at a time when I had been
Of
posting a lot
course.
about fishing. And of course, when you post anything online, you're certain to get some sort of a hateful crowd out there
Oh yeah.
somewhere.
It's a
So
cesspool.
yep. So I started posting about it. And of course, thankfully, like 90% of it is people who know me and they care about me and they're saying, oh my gosh, I'm just so glad you're all right. And I'm like, yes, I'm glad I could bring this to your attention as like a, hey, yes, there's safe ice some places, but you still need to be careful. Like it's early ice, you still
Yeah.
need to be very careful. That was my main goal, is make people aware that you need to be careful. There's still plenty of sketchy ice out there.
Because like you
Two things
said,
I should also mention that are important to this
mm-hmm.
story that I forgot about. Number one, I didn't realize this at the time, but I actually hit my head on the ice on the way in. And when I came out, my
Oh
dad asked me
shit.
what the blood was from, and I had a big cut like on my head where I hit my head on the ice. So if I had hit my head on the
Oh
ice and I
yeah.
didn't have a float suit on, I would have just sunk if I had been knocked out by
Mm-hmm.
that. Yeah, that was not great. And then, shoot, on top of that, I forgot what I was gonna say.
Man.
Yeah, I
That's
guess
crazy. Yeah,
that's
I
the
guess
big
I never
thing
even
though.
thought of that either.
No, it's not a great time. Especially, I'd hit my head like I had turned away as I had fallen through, and I hit my head on the thicker ice, so that was not a good time.
Yeah.
I know what I was going to say. You mentioned shock. The thing that nobody tells you about, or at least no one had told me about, was when I fell in, I immediately had trouble breathing. And although I don't run as much
Huh.
as I used to, I still run a lot. And so when I fell into the water, it was like a inhale super hard breath of fresh air, but you just run out of breath so fast because it's so much work keeping yourself afloat and keeping yourself warm in that really cold water. So even though I run and I feel like I'm in good shape, I got exhausted immediately. And for the next few days, my lungs just felt tired, like I had really overworked them.
Oh my God. That's crazy. That's
Yeah.
insane, dude. Like, ugh, that is literally like everybody's worst nightmare. Boy,
Yeah,
I
it's up
am
there.
glad that everything worked out okay. Yeah. Because like you said,
Thanks.
even
Me
though
too.
it's 7 feet, 7 feet of water, that's deep. I mean, you even
Right.
if it had been only a couple of feet of water, the current catches you and takes you under. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
yoy,
No, ice
freaky
safety is
stuff, man.
not something to be taken lightly. That's for sure.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so we've covered how not to die on the ice.
Yep. Yep. That's the key.
I
Yep. That
think
is the key.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I've got a striker ice bib set that I think when I first bought it, I remember thinking something. I don't remember what I something about it floating, and I was like, oh, what would I ever need that for? Well, something
Yup,
like that.
that's
And I never even thought about like if you do hit your head, even,
Yeah.
man, now you got my brain spinning.
Yeah, that's good. Yep.
Let's talk about tip ups for northerns, because I love jigging, and I haven't quite mastered tip ups. I'll be honest. I have some tip downs. I have some tip ups, but and I mean, I don't, like you said, like, okay, so you drill a bunch of holes and you set up a shanty and nothing is biting. It is hard to get the motivation to get up and move because you just spent all this time and put in all this work to set up these tip ups and stuff. But so say after 10 or 20 minutes, you're not getting any bites. What would be your suggestion? Maybe should I like check the bait? Maybe am I hooking it wrong? Or what would be your suggestion on how to set it up?
On a tip up, you're saying?
Yeah.
So I actually will not set up tip ups until I start catching fish. Generally.
Okay.
Unless I'm fishing, like if I'm fishing a shallow, weedy lake where I know there are pike and it's a small lake, I'll just set up tip ups because I know there's only so much water the fish can be in. But if it's like a massive body of water like Lake Winnebago and I'm trying to find roaming walleyes, then I won't set up tip ups with minnows until I actually start marking some fish jigging on the screen. And that way I know at least there's fish in the area.
That's interesting.
Like you said though, motivation to move is minimal if all of a sudden you have to pack up all these tip ups that you just spent all the time setting up, because it does take time to put them out. So I usually won't set them up until I'm on a spot that I know I want to fish for a little while. But again, if it's like a lake that I am just fishing, that's a small lake for pike, for example, usually it just depends on my past experience with the lake or what I know about the lake. So if I know that there are big pike in the lake and I've got a lot of tip ups out, usually I'm not going to like mess with them too much, because tip ups are a thing where you can have it set up all day long, and then all of a sudden the last hour you might have a pike just come by your tip up and bite. Like sometimes messing with them isn't the best thing to do. I'm also just way overconfident in my tip up rigging, where I'm like, at this point, I know that I'm just so confident in my rigging that if I've got a tip up in front of that pike's face and it comes near me, it is going to bite. That is not true. Don't get me wrong. That's not true. Not every pike is going to bite. But my thought is just, okay, I'm so confident in this bait and this setup that if a pike swims by it, I'm going to get it. So I'm just going to put it here, and I think this is a good spot, so we're going to do this. But if it's like, let's take a small weedy lake, for example, usually I'll set up a tip up around the weed lines that transitions from shallow to deep water. A lot of fish will roam along those, and panfish will roam along them, and then if predators come by, they'll hide, and then your tip up bait will just be sitting there. So I'll usually fish weed lines. If there's points in the lake, pike love cruising along points in the winter looking for food. I don't know why. Really? That's just a fish behavior thing. A bit similar to how you might fish like a point for bass or walleyes in the summer. Pike absolutely love structure in the winter. If I see a point sticking out from shore, I will definitely put tip ups along that point.
Huh. That's interesting. I guess I didn't realize that. Because you're right. The minute I see a point in the summer, I'm out there with the boat and hitting the walleyes pretty hard. But
yeah,
I always tend to gravitate, well, obviously weed edges and stuff, like for northerns.
Another thing too that I've messed around with a lot is the tip up depth. So I've caught pike by putting the tip up bait right under the ice in the past. I've also caught them by putting the tip up bait right on the bottom. So it's usually I found it to be a depending on the day type thing. Some days they'll really want the tip up baits up high. Some days they'll really want them down low. And so what I'll do is at the start of the day, I'll put a couple of them up high. And usually I tip up fish with a group of people. That way I can have a lot of tip ups out and I'm not just fishing with 3. So I can experiment that way and figure out what the fish want. But usually I'll set up a few tip ups up high. I'll set up a few tip up baits down near the bottom. And then if we start getting one of those sets to go off, then okay, they're feeding up high. Let's move all the tip up baits up higher.
All right. That's interesting. Do you prefer 8 or 10-inch holes? So this morning I did an interview with somebody and he was like, I only punch 8-inch holes. And I was like, what if you get like a really big fish? But he's like, yeah, but I also tend to step in the holes and then my foot goes through. And I'm like,
That's fair. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I guess.
So I would say that I only own 8-inch auger blades, but I'm also just a college kid, and that's just the equipment I have, and I'm not rushing out to buy anything
Yeah.
new and fancy. But the 10-inch auger, I do want one. Right now, I have landed multiple 39, 40, 41-inch pike through an 8-inch hole, but it is challenging. Like they're so wide usually, and their heads are so big that getting the fish up that hole is challenging. But that's not actually the hard part. Like getting their head through the hole, fitting it through is not the hard part. The hard part is if you're doing what I like to do, which is fishing for pike in a foot of water, especially on the Mississippi River, like we talked about before. I'm fishing in a foot of water in the mud, and you're trying to get a 40-inch fish through 12 inches of water up a hole. How does that work?
Right.
So if you've got a 10-inch hole, it's a lot easier. You've got a lot more wiggle room to turn the fish upward and work it up the hole. Whereas with the 8-inch hole, sometimes it's just so hard to get the fish to like turn up into that narrower hole to get it up through the ice. So a 10-inch hole can be helpful that way. I also really like sight fishing for panfish. That's something I talk about all the time in my Facebook posts. And with that, if you have a 10-inch hole, you can just see a lot more of what's going on around you in the sight fishing hole than you can with an 8. Again, all I use is an 8, but if I had a 10, I would definitely use it.
Well, especially if you're using any kind of electronics, you've got the Flexlar or anything like that. My Ion, I bought after a girls' trip. I went out there and it was like, I don't know, negative a million on Poigan. And it was like four of us girls, right? And 3 non-fishermen and me. So I'm out there and I thought I was slick with my drill bit auger, and that didn't last very long. So then we were like, one of them like went to this shanty over there and she was like, will you please help us? We just need like 4 holes. And on the way back, literally on the way back, I stopped at Cabela's and I was like, look, I'm going to need to buy something with a little more oomph than this like drill bit auger that I have, right? And all they had was a 10-inch. And I was like, all right, well, that's fine. But there have been times where I've taken the kiddos out and I thought maybe an 8-inch auger bit might have been better just for panfish, you know?
Yeah.
Because sometimes the 10-inch really, it's a beast to haul around too. But
yeah, it is. Right. And I move around so much, which is why I think that an 8-inch auger is better. It's just lighter. But the thing with the 8 is that, speaking of Lake Poigan, last year, the group of folks that I fished with throughout the winter, I didn't hook any of them, but the folks in my group did. 4 muskies were hooked on Lake Poigan last year, and unfortunately, all of them did not get landed. They would every single one of them. We would have it up to the hole. We would see it, and either it would plaster itself to the hole sideways under the ice, and it would be so big that you just could not get the thing up the 8-inch hole. If we're talking like 40, 45-inch pike, or sorry, not pike, muskies here. Like those are very large fish, very hard to get up the hole. One of them just cut them off, nothing further than that. But a lot of these fish, it would just be, we'd have them up to the hole multiple times. They'd be rubbing the line on the ice, wearing that down. And then you're trying to get this fish up the hole. And they're just such large fish. If we had that 10-inch auger, I really think we would have had a better shot at landing those big fish.
100%. Yeah, I would agree with that. So when you go to a new body of water, you're looking for points, I guess. So if you're looking at Navionics, are you looking more for holes, or are you fishing more shallow, do you think? Well, I guess does it depend on early ice or late ice? Does that depend? Does it matter?
It totally depends on the lake. I hate to give you that answer, but like there's shallow lakes. To me, a shallow lake, I'm not as worried about the depth difference.
Okay.
So like if, let's say it's just a 10-foot deep lake, I'm not as worried about, am I fishing the 2-foot spot or am I fishing the 10-foot hole? Like fish are so much more willing to just move throughout all the depths of the lake because it's all so similar. But then you get like a lake that has a 10-foot shallow weed flat and then you've got a 40-foot hole. Like there are times where you will find tons of panfish in the 40-foot hole in the middle of winter, especially if those weeds up shallow die off. But then there's times a year where, like, let's say it's early ice where all the weeds up shallow are living, and so they're putting off oxygen, they're bringing in lots of little insects that the fish like to feed on. You might get a ton of panfish hanging out in the shallows, even though that 40-foot of water is still available. So looking at Navionics, it's tough to say where I'd start without, like, seeing an example of a lake.
Yeah.
Like Lake Poigan is just a big basin. I just go out there and I drill holes. Like I might be fishing in 2 feet of water and catch fish. I might be fishing in 11 feet of water and catch fish. I'm just drilling around all sorts of depths trying to find where those fish are at. But then you look at, again, like a shallow, weedier lake up in the North Woods, for example. I'm definitely going to look for points. I'm going to look for deeper holes. I'm going to look for shallower water. Again, with how much I move, usually I'm not worried about, okay, I'm going to set up on this one spot today and that's going to be the spot that I catch fish on. It's more of a, okay, where are all of the spots that I want to fish today and check all of these. And at some point, one of these is probably going to be good. But I'm not just picking a random point on the map. I'm saying, okay, here's something that for this reason would probably hold fish.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of answered my next question too, because my next question was going to be, well, actually, you kind of answered my next 3 questions, really.
Perfect.
Actually,
we like to be efficient, it's good.
Well, one of them was, what would be the one rule you would follow every time the bite slows? And that would probably be to move. And if,
yep.
And what's the fastest way to turn a skunk day into a fish day would probably be to move.
Yeah. I would say the skunk day one. I mean, we all have slow days. That's just at a certain point that's going to happen if you're out fishing enough. But I mean, part of it depends on what you're fishing for as well. Like if you're fishing for bluegills, I guess the things you would do if you get skunked are different than if you were fishing for pike. Like pike, if you're running tip ups for pike, you might just say, well, maybe the bait that's on my tip up isn't good. I'm running live golden shiners, but dead golden shiners are more effective, says Matthew. I do say that, but I do so much better with northern pike with dead bait than live bait. But anyway, let's say you're using live bait and it's just not working. You're just not getting pike, but pike are in that lake. You switch to dead bait, boom, all of a sudden you get fish. That's that's what I would do if I were switching something while pike fishing. But then you have bluegills. And if you're getting skunked with bluegills are not known for being a challenging fish to catch necessarily, so you're probably just not on the bluegills. If you're just not marking any on your screen, doesn't matter what kind of sonar you have, you're just not marking any. If you're sight fishing, you're just not seeing any, you can't catch fish that aren't there. So you might just have to keep moving. But if they are there and they're not biting, a lot of the time that's just a finicky bite, and you might just need to downsize your jig, go to something really tiny like a 2mm, 3mm tungsten jig. Sometimes that'll get them to go. I've had days where they want something bigger, like a big jigging wrap, like a number 2 or number 3 jigging wrap. They might want to be feeding on minnows. There are so many things in the list of adjustments you can make on the water. It is endless, but it all is situational. It all depends on the day, depends on what you're fishing for, depends on where you're fishing.
How do you tell when you're fishing, how do you get, I always see sometimes I see a lot of these fishing videos and you see them and they just kind of look like they're kind of just curious and they're kind of checking the bait out. And then all of a sudden, do you have kind of a go-to technique to get them to strike when it looks like they're just kind of checking it out and not ready to commit? Do you have a go-to technique to get them to commit?
Typically be way more aggressive.
Really? Just really just start when you're jigging, really bouncing on the bottom or something, or just twitching or
not necessarily twitching more aggressively in terms of I guess one of the best baits I can use as an example for this is jigging shadow wraps. It's a big glide bait used through the ice for walleyes and sometimes northern pike or occasionally muskies. So that's one that if you are gently jigging it real slowly, you're snapping it up and it's just slowly circling down, and then you're waiting a few seconds, and then you're popping it up and doing a little pop, and it's slowing down. And you're having walleyes that come up, they dart super fast, they fly up, and they come to grab it, and then they just stop. They hit the brakes an inch or two before hitting your bait. That, I see that all the time when people post videos of fishing on a lake like Poygan for walleyes. They'll be jigging their bait, and then the fish, it'll fly up super interested, super aggressive, and that just stops. Or it'll move up real slow and then just stop and then kind of leave and fade away. So I've found that that's a kind of bait where the more aggressive I am, the more aggressive the fish get. So I feel like that's because those baits look like little perch or little bait fish. And if you are acting like a little bait fish trying to essentially make the bait dart like crazy, dart around, it's making the fish think, oh shoot, this bait might get away. I need to get this before it escapes. So they might want to just be more aggressive and come up and hit it quicker, that rather than sit there and say, oh, this is sitting here, I got all day to think about this. I might eat it later. I might eat this in an hour. I'll think about it. But with being more aggressive, you can get those fish to come up quicker. And then thinking about panfish, with panfish, I'd say I play around more with the size of the bait. Like if I'm just seeing a lot of slow fish, I might downsize, I might upsize. But another thing is similar with the aggressive jigging. Like again, being more aggressive with the jigging. There's some days where you can catch panfish that are just you're dead sticking the jig. Like the jig is just hanging there and they want it that way. I've had days where I'm jigging the jig like crazy, like I normally do, and then they will not hit unless I set the rod down and I like take a phone call. And all of a sudden, oh shoot, there's a fish on the line. But with the aggressive jigging that I do for panfish, I usually will drop the jig down to the bottom, and then I'll be shaking the jig very rapidly, and I'll be lifting the jig up and away. And then as soon as I get to like just below the ice, I'll drop the jig all the way back down. I found that bluegills especially really like to come up towards their prey that they're trying to eat. And a lot of insects that you'll see if you look at underwater videos, they'll actually start in the weeds. And if they like detach from that clump of weeds, they might swim up towards the surface slowly. And usually they're just kind of floating up. It's not a super fast rip away. It's like a just slowly hovering up and away like the thing is floating in the water.
Interesting.
And sometimes I'll do that pattern of jigging up and down, like the pulling up and away and dropping it down. I might do that like 10 or 15 times to convince one fish to bite. But usually if you just do that pattern enough times, eventually it'll come up and bite. The thing that'll it just can make fish absolutely disappear on you is if you're pulling it up and away and then you just stop. Like, let's say you stop halfway up the water column, you just stop it there. And they're like, wait a minute, that doesn't look right. Like normally those things float away from me and then I have to chase them. At least that's what I think is going on in the fish's head. But again, like that pulling it up and away, you're trying to make it look somewhat natural, like what those fish are seeing. When I was out a few days ago, I actually had one of the bugs that the fish were feeding on. It swam up the hole that I was fishing in, and so I grabbed it and I put it on my jig. But when I saw the thing swimming, it was swimming exactly like I just discussed, like doing the slow hover up and away. And then as it came up to the surface and swam up the hole, I had two bluegills that chased it. They chased it up, almost up the hole.
Oh my God.
So I'm like, okay, well, at least now I know what they're eating and I know how they want it to be moving. So I started doing that, and I changed my jigging canes that day a little bit because I thought it was going to be more of a dead sticking bite. And as soon as I started doing that pulling up and away, way more fish were coming up after it.
Oh my God, that's crazy. That's so interesting. Fish are...
Yeah, and another thing on that with the insects is that if they don't have anywhere to escape, like if they don't have an ice fishing hole to hide through, a lot of times they'll get stuck under the ice. So I do best pan fishing a lot of the time in the shallows, especially sight fishing, if I'm jigging right under the ice. Like to where I think the fish assume that little insect got stuck on the way out of the water and he's got stuck under the ice. So that's where they want to hit it. They're not used to seeing insects way down, like at the bottom or hovering in the middle of the water column.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you spend a lot of time studying these little critters. Like
I
you really do.
That's
like, you really
nothing I say is just like a guess, like it's something I haven't tried before. Everything that I say about what I think fish are doing or what I think they're thinking is because of what I've seen in thousands of hours of either me actually fishing and watching them and how they react, or going on YouTube and saying, okay, videos of fish underwater. Like that is like ice fishing underwater camera videos are some of the best learning tools you can have. Obviously, there's some bodies of water where they're real aggressive and they'll just come up and eat no matter what, but there's a lot of times where you just can learn from, especially pressured bodies of water where these fish are finicky. You can learn a lot from watching how people jig and what convinces those fish to bite.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good attitude to have, though, because a lot of these fishing pros are like, well, I know everything.
Yeah.
Just listen to me.
Anybody who says they know everything is not being honest.
Yeah.
Everybody I know has had a few bad days on the water here and there, but they clearly didn't know everything.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, okay, so if somebody wanted to come and see your next seminar or learn more about your appearances, for example, and shameless plug for the Wisconsin Fishing Club at Granger's Pub in Milwaukee on February 10th at, I think the meeting starts at 7.
Something like that. Yeah.
Matthew will be speaking at the Wisconsin Fishing Club. So I will post all the links to that in the show notes at thehuntfishtravel.com website when this episode posts, but if they want to keep up with you, do you have a website or a newsletter where they can keep up with your
Facebook
upcoming
is by
appearances?
far the best resource. That's where I post all of my fishing reports. Usually it's almost
Okay.
daily. And then if I ever have seminars, speaking engagements, things like that, I'll usually post about them in advance, like a few weeks or even a month in advance.
Perfect. All right. Well, Matthew, I definitely appreciate you taking the time out of your evening to come on the show to talk to us about a whole bunch of fun stuff.
Thanks for having me on.
And to tell you that harrowing story that, man,
yeah,
kind of freaks me out. Like, I'm really
I
glad
appreciate
you're
it.
okay.
A lot of people will say that they don't want to be afraid of the ice, or like, oh yeah, I just don't ice fish because I'm afraid of the ice. Like, you need to have a certain level of a little bit of not fear necessarily, but like respect for the ice. Yeah,
Healthy
like you need to be aware that
yes.
things can go wrong,
You
especially
do?
if you get too complacent. And again, you do things like I did, which is rush out early in the morning without anybody there with me, with improper safety equipment. Again, there's a lot to learn from that.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's why sometimes I love doing the podcast and being able to provide a platform to share some of these stories. And I appreciate people like you being willing to come on to the show and share stories like that, because everybody can learn from that. And hopefully it'll make somebody think next time when they're running out on the first ice, like,
same thing.
Let's go.
Same thing with late ice
take a
too.
minute.
Same thing with that late winter ice when it starts to decline. Like,
sure.
I've been in a similar situation with my spud bar where my spud bar has saved me, and it's spudded through the ice very quickly. And I said, oh, there's a thin spot from the recent runoff warming up the water. Like, you got to be very cautious, especially as we head to like February and March.
Yes. Excellent. All right. Well, I will let you get back to your evening. I thank you very much for coming on, and I will get this edited and posted up, and I will tag you on it, and I'll shoot you an email or a message.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Good talking fishing with you.
All right.